What if the key to successful recruiting isn't in your outreach strategy, but in your ability to build a community?
I think community building is everything. And I'm going to say this, if you're a recruiting firm and you're not focused on building community in the Discord, through email newsletters, through virtual events, you are going to be left behind.
That's Taylor Desseyn, a recruiter who's turned the traditional talent acquisition model on its head. He's built a following of thousands across multiple platforms, not by cold calling or mass emailing, but by creating content that resonates with software engineers.
If you let data lead your content strategy, you're not building community. I'm going to say that again. If you focus on data, you're not building community.
In this episode, Taylor shares his unconventional approach to tech recruiting. He'll share how he manages content across platforms, why he ignores analytics, and what he believes is the future of talent acquisition. Whether you're starting out with content creation or looking to refine your strategy, Taylor's insights will challenge you to rethink your approach to recruiting. Let's hear from Taylor about how he got started in talent acquisition. So, thank you so much for being on the show today, Taylor. Can you tell us a bit about how you got started in recruiting?
Yeah, I woke up one afternoon and I felt a calling. No, I'm just kidding. Honestly, I fell into it because I was broke playing music and I needed a day job. I mean, for real, a lot of people have asked me this question, like, how'd you make the transition? Like, did you have like this epiphany? Like, yada, yada, yada. And I was like, no, like literally I moved to Nashville in 2011 to serve tables and basically was serving tables 6 nights a week. And I was losing money. I grew up in the restaurant industry. My dad owned the Outback Steakhouse in my hometown for 25, 30 years. And so I grew up waiting tables, started at bus boy, getting paid under the table at like 12 years old. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that out loud, but whatever. And then essentially, obviously worked my way up. So I moved to Nashville and I was like, this is going to be great. Because I made decent money, right? Because when you're in a small town, a college town, this is where I was at, like everybody eats corporate chain restaurants, right? So I was like, well, I'm moving to Nashville. I'm only going to have to work like 2 nights a week and be able to play. Dead wrong. Nobody in Nashville eats chain restaurants, or obviously not as much as the general population. So I was like losing money, and like my idiot self was going to get like a valet job at night. Like I just didn't know how to find a day job. And so there was a group of us from my hometown that all moved up together. I asked this one person, I was like, who do you know? This girl nannied for my first boss. She's like, well, I nanny for somebody. And I was like, well, if they can afford a nanny, I want to do what they do. And so I was like, what do they do? And they were like, well, she's looking to hire a recruiter. I said, great. So I interviewed. And then a week or two later, I got the offer. And I guess you could say the rest is history.
Wow, that's such a cool story. And I used to work for a guy that firmly believes that the best recruiters start out working in the food industry. Like it was a
100%.
problem. Yeah, for him, it's like,
100%.
you've never worked at a restaurant. I'm like, no, but I promise you, I'm great at recruiting.
Yeah. I mean, literally, like looking back on it, I mean, the restaurant industry for sure. I mean, I worked. Did you see that meme on the internet lately? It's like for millennials, our World War II is working in the restaurant industry.
No, I haven't
Have
seen
you seen
it.
that floating around? It was like this meme that says like our World War II is like, oh, you did hospitality, or you did restaurant, or you did retail. Like, oh wow, it's like those are the branches you served. So out of the 3 branches, hotel, restaurant, and retail, I did restaurant and retail. So
Wow, so cool. Like many of us, like no one
yes,
plans, like, let's start as a recruiter. Like hardly anyone
never,
plans that.
never.
So, what made you passionate about like building online communities for tech professionals?
Yeah, it happened really late in my career, and that's why I tell people, if the people like, oh, I feel like I'm late, like you're actually never late, because I didn't start this until 2020. But if you look back on it, I was actually starting the community building process early in my career. I just didn't know it then. So basically, traditional recruiter, heads down, grinding. One thing I did really well is I could outwork anybody on my team, right? So I was like first to the job boards. I mean, any recruiters that watch this, first to the job boards, led the team in submittals, led the team in, screens. Like I was just a machine. And so I did that and I loved it, right? Started to really become annoyed with the recruiting process after I was 2020. At that point, I was recruiting for 9 years. I would say around year 7. So like 2 years before the pandemic, I started to get restless. I was like, God, there's got to be a better way to recruit than just sending a bunch of DMs, sending a bunch of emails, getting people on the phone. And so I started to get a little frustrated. And then like once COVID hit, I was like, all right, I think now's my time to like, change things up. Right. And so that's what I did. I started, to really follow. I mean, really a lot of my success is towards Gary Vaynerchuk. I'm sure if you listen to this and, probably have heard of him at this point, kind of this master content creator in the business space, really led the first like business person creating content, right? Like in my opinion. And so that like wasn't a true creator. And so followed really kind of his blueprint, right? I started my email newsletter. I started my texting community. I started to put content out on LinkedIn. I started to put on content on Twitter. And that really kind of started my journey into like content community. And then and launched my Discord, I think a year, like 2 years ago, and have about 800 engineers on it now. And so yeah, again, spent my entire career obviously heads down, doing the tactile, shaking hands, kissing babies type thing, but really kind of moved to more of a community mindset in 2020.
Amazing, amazing. I think that's really the year where a lot of people started
Yes.
doing it and out of necessity for many reasons. So I have a similar background as you as far as like
Nice.
there has to be a better way to do this.
Yes.
I'm
I'm
so
so
tired of
tired.
DMing people like,
It's like,
oh
please
my
talk to
gosh.
me. Please talk to me.
Yes, yes. So, and then when everyone started doing it, it's like, yeah, now it's cool to do this thing that I've been doing that
Yep.
I've had to convince every boss of like, maybe this is how they are hesitant when you do these things.
Oh
So
yeah.
we all know that content and like social media is really your thing and how you shine and how you build communities. Can you share some of the strategies that you use to engage your audience?
Strategies. I'm going to be honest with you. I wing everything. And to be honest, I think it drives a lot of people nuts, especially like businesses I've consulted for, because they're like, well, do you have and like, listen, like I'm not a polished social media person. Like I'm not. Like I've consulted with businesses and brands to help grow their presence. And, I'm very good at like knowing the engineering market and knowing the software engineering side of things and like knowing how to communicate with software developers. And so, but the thing is that what drives a lot of leadership nuts is like, I'm not organized. I'm like, listen, like just put stuff out. And they're like, what do you mean just put stuff out? I'm like, anything is content. Like anything is content. And when you start to like think of it that way, it's really hard to put frameworks around everything because you just, the whole point is trying to get your business or your daily life that you consistently do outward onto the internet, right? And to do that, people get so muddled with strategies that they don't put anything out, right? They're like, well, we should set our pillars and we should set our, we should set a content calendar. This is a hot take here. If you set a content calendar, that's not content. Because
Really?
content in my perspective is spur of the moment. Prime example, right? Last week, Gun.io, the company I work for, we put out a product. We dropped a product. It's really, really cool. We're basically turning our entire database of engineers, because we're a talent marketplace, into a public ATS. Like literally any hiring manager, any recruiter can use it to find engineers, and then obviously pay us a fee if you want to use the developer. And so I posted something. What did I do? I posted about another feature we have coming out, but I forgot to post about Discover Talent the day it dropped. And I got upset with myself because I was like, oh no, like I missed out because everything is so contextual. And so for me, when it comes to strategy, like it's a lot of experimenting. That's why I drive a lot of traditional marketers nuts. I've worked with a lot of traditional marketers and I've not gotten along with them. And that's okay. Like I totally understand in my past experiences. And for me, it's like to do content, it's kind of like consistently texting and communicating with your friends at scale, right? So you don't put metrics on your text messaging with friends. You don't put guardrails on how you text with friends. You have a conversation, and that's how businesses need to think about strategy, and that's how I think about strategy. I just post everything. There's some nuances that we can get into it, but for the most part, post things who obviously that resonate with people, right? And show your journey, which is incredibly important.
So I know you say that strategy is really not your thing or anything,
Yeah.
but I've looked at your content. I've looked at what you do, and I do think there's kind of maybe some strategy behind it,
There
even
is.
if
I mean, like that was tongue in cheek a little bit. I mean, so for me, like I did set my audience and who I wanted to talk to, right? So as a recruiter, as a traditional recruiter, I kind of sat down. I was like, all right, who am I trying to reach? One, I'm trying to reach hiring managers so they can hire from me. Two, I'm trying to reach the software developer community because that was the niche that I doubled down on. So I was like, all right, how do I communicate to those people without communicating to them? I started an engineering podcast based off the job search, right? So again, like I didn't start a recruiting podcast. I started a podcast that had my audience in mind, and then I worked backwards from that. So, and then based off how I'm pivoting, I'm starting to put out more content around building content because I'm building out content at Gun.io, building more community stuff at Gun.io. So I'm starting to pivot my content. But for me to, at the start, figure out who you're trying to talk to and develop content for that audience. Don't develop content for you.
that is the most important thing, and that's so crucial. And that's what I was going to say. Looking at your content, it's very clear who it's for. It's like you see other people's content, you're like, well, who do they sell to? Who are they talking to? It's like, no, I absolutely know Taylor's talking to engineers and
Yep.
obviously to the people who hire engineers. So that's
Yep.
that's really great. You
Absolutely.
are everywhere. Podcasting, texting, Discord, Twitter, LinkedIn, literally everywhere. How do you manage your time effectively to maintain engagement across all of these channels and like do your job?
Yeah. So it's literally, as you said, that I just changed the calendar invite on my calendar right now as we're talking for something. So, I mean, I think, I'm getting this question a lot and I'm very blessed to have a small marketing budget, to have a content team around me to help distribute this stuff at scale. I did not start out that way. I literally started in March of 2020 on my content journey, posting manually to LinkedIn, using the scheduling tool in LinkedIn, and then posting to Twitter. Those are the two platforms, right? You got to figure out where your platforms are. For the most part, people who watch this podcast or listen to this podcast, you're mostly going to be on LinkedIn, right? Maybe on Twitter, but mainly LinkedIn. And so for me, like, a lot of people want to do all the things at one time and then they get burned out and then they just get dizzy and they're like, forget it. I can't do this anymore. For me, I have built my audience and my growth on each platform year over year. So 2020 was LinkedIn, Twitter. That was it. 2021 was, I think we added TikTok. 2022, we added Instagram with Discord. 2023 was YouTube. And then 2024, this year is much more YouTube and like educational content. And so again, like for those of you listening, like I started posting my own self, just to let you know how far along like I've come. I used to sit down in the pandemic and I bought a $20 Amazon phone stand and I posted 3-minute long videos on LinkedIn shot horizontal on your phone. I don't know if you know, but like no one does that now, right? You
No.
could say, well, that's YouTube content, and it is, but like now it's everything's vertical, everything's off your phone, everything's short because none of us got attention spans. So again, like I've kind of walked through this process and experimented with a lot. But again, I started with just myself, but now I have a team that helps me, and which I'm very, very grateful for.
How big is your team?
I have a ghostwriter to help with emails. So I write my own. I write most of the email newsletter. My ghostwriter writes like the summary of the video I put out. My ghostwriter also puts out TikTok and Instagram posts because those platforms aren't really focused on community building. It's more just the actual video. It's not the text. So I'm very particular to make sure that my voice comes through, and I'm very particular on who writes it for me. I'm very fortunate. The girl who actually does my ghostwriting, who works for my content company or my buddy's content company, she's like BFFs with my wife. Like they grew up together.
Okay.
So it's like a really small world, but she's an amazing writer and really writes like I do, which is incredibly important, which we can dive into about tone and stuff like that from a business perspective. But for me, I try to make sure I control the platforms that like are like, you have to have tone and knowledge of the market, which for me is Twitter and LinkedIn. So I always control my Twitter and LinkedIn. But then, okay, so we have that. Sorry. So to answer your question, we have that. We have her. We have another guy that does part-time stuff for my YouTube because he does all the thumbnails and curation of it. I have a video editor, and then so 3 people. 3 people, and then we pull in fractional video people depending on what the project is.
Very, very cool. Have you faced any challenges in like building your community and like creating content?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of challenges, right? I mean, I think experimenting what works. I mean, if you see some of my old stuff, it's awful. And I think I posted a video on Twitter the other day, and everyone's like, "You don't look that bad," and I was like, "I think I look awful." I think some challenges. So I think growing. I think the biggest challenges is you can't do this for the likes and follower count. You just can't. Like I've stopped looking at analytics a long time ago. And I would say that for businesses. And I sold that to Gun.io and they were very appreciative. I was like, listen, we can't look at analytics for like the first year. And so like everything's got to be organic. It's about building. If you get caught up, if you let data lead your content strategy, you're not building community. I'm going to say that again. If you focus on data, you're not building community, right? And what I mean by that is if you let the data dictate on how you post, you're not going to be posting relevant stuff that your community wants to listen to, because data shows a lagging indicator, not a forward indicator, right? And so when it comes to content, you got to be constantly listening. How do I listen? I live on Twitter, right? I literally have TweetDeck open 24/7. I follow a bunch of developer blogs. I follow a bunch of developer podcasts, right? I follow a bunch of conferences. I follow a bunch of quote unquote tech influencers, right? To try to keep like updated and listen and follow the industry, because I'm not in the industry, right? Like you got to remember, I'm a recruiter that is wolf in sheep's clothing, right? And I'm very aware of that. So I take my role seriously to basically be like, listen, before I speak, I need to know the industry, right? I went out on a limb today and posted about back-end engineering and AI. It was very aggressive, very techie for me. Fortunately, it was well received, but it's because I've listened and I've observed before making posts. And so I think the biggest challenge is I always want to grow faster. I always want to put out more and interesting content. But what I've realized is this thing's a journey. It's like going to the gym. You're not going to get in shape overnight. Your content, your community is not going to get better or grow overnight either.
Yeah, and I think the difference that we have as recruiters, as TA professionals in creating content, and why what you said is so important. It's not about likes and follows and stuff like that. It's about building community, because it goes back to traditional recruiting. People want to work and they're going to go with people that they trust. Just your content isn't going to build trust. It's building that community behind your content that builds that trust. And at the end of the day, you're doing it to recruit, right? You're not doing
Yeah.
it to be an influencer.
Right. Yeah. And it is interesting. You know, I hate the word influencer. You know, I hate the word content creator. It's so funny. I went to the dentist yesterday and they're like, so what do you do? And I was like, I literally can say recruiter or content creator, and I hate both words. And so for me, yeah, again, I think like you have to want to help people. And the best way to help people is to give back at scale through content.
That reminded me of your video that you did a few days ago, or it was yesterday, about like what you do and explaining it to your mom because
Yeah.
she asked. I was like, I need
My
to do
mom
one of
asks me all
these.
the time. Yeah.
So I
Do it to
explained it to
mom and
my
then just post it.
mom. I explained it to her and she's like, so you're an influencer? No, let's not use that word to describe me.
Well, we've gotten to the point. It was really funny. And listen, I'm super blessed. I don't say this to brag, but like my wife even's gotten to the point now where if somebody comes to her, like, so my wife's a photographer and a commercial photographer. She's on set right now at a week-long photo shoot for doing some product stuff. And one of the managers on set, their son is trying to get into software development. And my wife was so funny. She humbles me. I love her to death, but she keeps me in check. But she did say, she goes, listen, she goes, actually, my husband's an influencer in the software engineering space. And for her to say that, I was like, all right, well, thank you. But basically like, but it was really cool. We were at Mother's Day lunch on Sunday, and the guy that served tables for us knows me through my content, through career advice stuff. So really cool to be able to go out. I've started to get that more in Nashville, and it's really humbling, but it also makes me more motivated, and it puts more responsibility. Like people are watching, and I take that very seriously.
Yeah, that's something very important to keep in mind as recruiters, as we're creating content. It's for job search. That's a life-changing situation in anyone's life. Like, and it's a huge responsibility what you're saying, what you're putting out there, because it's potentially impacting someone's livelihood.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
How do you decide like what type of content resonates best with your community? Because you do all of these things and you don't look at metrics. So how do you decide like, okay, this is the one that works the best, this type?
Again, it's listening to the market, right? So the content I put out today that's doing very well on LinkedIn is around back-end engineering. And so what I did is like, I was like, all right, so it's kind of a twofold. So I created this post and I talked about how AI and machine learning are going to fuel more back-end engineers, and that there's not enough back-end engineers right now because everybody went front-end over the years. So I pulled this so to kind of get you in my brain to see how I create a post. I was like, well, first off, so main thing is I tease my topics through Twitter. So Twitter is a brain dump for me. I tweet everything, right? And so people like try to play the game and get paid by Twitter, which I get. And so they tweet less and they try to give hot takes, or they try to give like, it's more of a scarcity mindset. That's not me. I tweet everything. I tweet probably 15, 20 times a day. I never get a ton of impressions. But what I do is I experiment with the content that works, right? So the post I made today about LinkedIn, I made a post yesterday about back-end engineering and how people need to focus on that. That did very well. A lot of great conversations. Like, okay, so this is good. So then I expounded on my LinkedIn post a little bit to make it a little bit more for LinkedIn, not quite as short form as Twitter. And I was like, all right, what are some other data points I can pull from my experience? I remember recruiting React when React first came out, and companies were like if you could spell React, you got hired. And so I was like, all right, well, I'm going to put that into my post because it's my experience and it's what worked on Twitter yesterday. And so the two come together to make a really meaningful post on LinkedIn. So that's what I do. Again, I grew up playing drums. I moved to Nashville to do music to play drums. I've taught drums for a long time. Sometimes with drums, you either have it or you just don't. And I think a lot with content creation is kind of that way. You either kind of get it or you don't. And so I can tell you how I do it, but to me, it's like any sport, right? I play ice hockey. We won our championships last night. Shout out.
Yeah.
Very excited about that. Like when I go out on the ice, I don't think, I just do. If you play football, you don't think about where your hand, like when I play hockey, I'm not even trying to do football. I've never played football. I was a band nerd, but like play hockey. Like when I get the hockey stick, I don't think, or the puck on my stick, I don't think, okay, the puck's on my stick. I got to skate forward. I got to look up. I got to pass the offensive guy on my left. I don't think that. It's fluid. And that's the way it is with me with content. But that's probably the best way to break down on how I think about posts.
No, that totally makes sense. So talking a little bit about the sourcing aspect of it, do you find that people in your communities recommend each other for opportunities?
What do you mean by that?
So you have a Discord, you have
Yeah.
people on just followers. When you tweet about a job or something like that, do you find that they share it organically, that they tell
Oh, yeah.
other people about it?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think in this market, I think it's a fascinating time, especially for recruiters that listen to this. I think you have such an amazing opportunity to share your jobs on social. Like when I was a traditional recruiter and at my last company, and I started to train the team on how to put out content, the easiest content you can put out as a recruiter is what job you're working on right now. Like post it. It'll spread like wildfire. Why? Because people genuinely want to help people right now because the market sucks. It just does. Like, let's not put a sugar coat on it. I'm not going to be the recruiter. It's like, everything's good. No, it's actually probably gotten a little worse in the last like 45 days based off some data I've been seeing. I think it's finally starting to come out that the government may be giving some false data around job stuff. Like, things are starting to get a little weird, and I don't like it because between me and you, I thought we'd be out of this mess at this point. So like,
Yeah.
so for example, prime example, I have a video post that I did that my video guy edited that I was going to put out today, and I listened to it, and it's me saying the market's getting better. That was like 6 months ago, but I'm not going to post it now because it's not. That's what makes it so difficult. But yeah, going back to putting out content, like jobs, like everybody wants to help each other with jobs. And so if you're listening to this and you're a recruiter, I think the best way to get, because I get a lot of recruiters, I'm sure you do too, like how do I get started my content journey? Just post a job, just once a day, just post a job you're working on, but give some context, right? If you're working on a JavaScript developer, don't say, hey, I have a JavaScript developer that pays 90K. Say, hey, I have a JavaScript developer that specializes in React and Node, that's paying 150K. You really need some AWS with some Lambda services. It's fully remote, but they want this person. Like, tell a story. And if you can start getting in that habit, you're going to be able to source candidates from the internet. Like, my candidates that I find from the internet are way better than anything you're going to find on the job boards.
Yes, 1,000,000% on that. I don't think I've sourced from a job board. I'm not recruiting actively right now, but last year I was, or 2022 I don't think
Yeah.
I sourced from any job boards. No, it's
Right. Yep.
all online. It's all of
Yep.
that. So looking ahead, what are your thoughts on like the future of online talent communities?
I mean, I think community building is everything. And I think, I'm going to say this. If you're a recruiting firm and you're not focused on building community in the Discord, through email newsletters, through virtual events, you are going to be left behind. Because now you could be $1 billion organization listening to this right now. And if you are, thank you for listening. I appreciate it. But like, you got to focus on community. Like, people want to feel a part of a brand, and people want to feel a part of a community these days. And like, there's been a huge shift. There's been a huge shift in sales, right? Everything's content focused now. Everything is top of the funnel awareness and kind of massaging. It's a terrible term, but massaging that person through the process to get a sell, right? I saw a great TikTok the other day from a CMO, and she was like, long gone are the days, if you want to make more sales calls. She goes, you want to make more sales, put out more content. Right. And so I think every recruiting organization right now needs to be focused on building content, creating content. I want to give a shout out to Spyglass Partners. Some of my old team is there that I managed, and they are encouraged to have a live show podcast. Like, every
Wow.
person is encouraged. And so two of my old colleagues, shout out to Sloan, shout out to Joseph Jewell, you guys, and Sloan Bartley, you guys are the greatest. I've been very proud of them watching their content journey. They've both started morning shows and turn into podcast form. And I think every recruiting organization needs at least one. I think I've pitched this to other recruiting companies in the past. Depending on your specialties, I think you need to have a podcast per specialty. So if you do cybersecurity, you need to have a cybersecurity podcast. If you have an accounting practice, you need an accounting podcast, right? And it's very easy. You just interview people within your community based off topics that community would want to know. Right. So again, I'm not an accountant, but I'm sure there's topics that accountants are passionate about right now. I don't know what they are, but I'm sure they're out there. And so I think moving forward, I think every company needs a Discord. Every person I think marketing teams are different now. They need to look different. Instead of hiring traditional marketers, I think you hire content teams now. You hire video editors, you hire copywriters, you hire people who literally just press post on a post, right? Like, that's what it looks like moving forward. And I think the companies that can truly understand that are going to be able to move so much faster and have such better candidate quality for your clients.
Yeah. And for those listening, I have 2 episodes where I spoke to 2 different organizations doing podcasting to attract talent. It blew my mind how easy it is for them to do it, the topics. Because, like you said, maybe you don't know about accounting topics, but if you're recruiting for accounting, you should know what the things they're interested in. The podcast is really their top strategy for attracting
That's it.
talent.
That's it.
It blew my mind. So I'll link those also in the show notes so that people can see. So
Yep.
we've talked a lot about online, but
Yeah.
now that people are back into like going to conferences and things like that, how do you think that in person is playing a role in this community building?
In person is everything, right? So if you want to look at top of the funnel, bottom of the funnel in terms of marketing terms, top of the funnel is your content online, bottom of the funnel is shaking hands and kissing babies, right? And so right now, like, again, if I had it my way, if I built my own recruiting agency, right, the way I want to build it, I would build a content team, not a marketing team, and I would have somebody lead the content team. And any event we go to, I would bring a video person to document it. My success has exponentially increased over the last 3 or 4 years because I've had the opportunity with the companies I've worked for that have supported me, and shout out Gun.io for supporting me in this. They allowed me to bring a video person with me, and we capture moments, we capture conversations, we edit it, we give it back at scale. And that does multiple things. Like, social proof is everything right now. Like, people, to be trusted, and we all know this in the recruiting space, you have to like break bread with your people to be accepted with your people. And I think a lot of recruiters miss out on that. They want to sit at their desk. They want to pound out a bunch of calls. They want to be done for the day, which is fine. I know a ton of recruiters at my last company. That's all their job was. They never went to conferences. They never put out content, and they made way more money than me. But that's not what I want. I really want that community. And I will tell you this, like, going to conferences is everything. Shaking hands is everything. And I think recruiting firms right now need a budget for your recruiters to go to conferences, not just sponsor. And this is a whole nother thing. Just sponsoring a conference is not enough these days. Again, the playbook has shifted because of COVID. And like the sooner a recruiting organization, obviously I'm very passionate about this right now. It's between the iced coffee and the little sleep because I was up late last night. Again, it's just so important.
Yeah, it really is. And last thing, I also come from a background of talent marketplaces. I really believe in them. Believe in the differences between recruiting agencies, which I'm not knocking, but I know that talent marketplaces bring a lot more value, especially because of this community building aspect that they have and how quickly they can fill roles. Is there anything you want to say about Gun.io or how people can contact you and learn more about your talent marketplace?
Yeah. I mean, again, I'm on all socials, T Desseyn, TDESSEYN. I'm on every social media platform but Snapchat. I reach out to me at Taylor Desseyn at Gun.io. But yeah, again, just hit me up. Would love to chat. And like I said, I'm constantly online, so you always get me.
Perfect. And I'll link in the show notes as well. So thank you so much for this conversation today, Taylor. I think it's going to be great for everyone who's wanting to get started with content and building communities.
Love it. Thank you.
Wow. Taylor shared a ton of great information. Turns out you don't have to create the same type of content every other recruiter is creating in order to build a talent community. Be sure to connect with Taylor. His contact info is in the show notes. Speaking of content, next week I'm chatting with Joel Lalji. If you haven't heard of him, you've definitely been living under a rock. Joel's content is everywhere. Subscribe to Throughout the Playbook wherever you get your podcasts so that you don't miss out on our conversation. It's a free masterclass in content creation for recruiters. Thanks for listening, and I'll chat with you next week.